Hey folks, David Stewart here. I'd like to talk a little bit today about handheld gaming and the death of handheld gaming, the possible rebirth of handheld gaming. Now I'm making a distinction here, and this is really what this video is about, between handheld gaming, which is gaming on a handheld game console like this wonderful Nintendo DS system here, and mobile gaming, which is playing a game on your phone. And really one killed the other for quite a while now. And I want to take a trip back and look at some of the hardware that I think led to this and contributed to this, and how things may change in the future, and maybe some bright points that I see possibly on the horizon. So let's start with this. This, I think, is the last really dominant handheld gaming console. There were handheld gaming consoles that came after it, like the 3DS and the PS Vita. But this was the last one that I remember being truly dominant in that it sold a ton of units and a lot of people had one. I had one, carried it in my backpack or in my pocket for a long time, and I think it might actually be Nintendo's best-selling console still is the DS, all the different DS systems. There was an XL version, there was the original system, this is the DS Lite. It's been actually repaired because these little hinges tend to break on them, but it's a great system. You can open it up and you can hop right into some of your games. The games looked good. They were bright. This was having 3D in your pocket. This was a really kind of a new cool thing. This and the PSP, both of them were pretty awesome experiences. And so I have a lot of affection for this, and I spent a lot of time playing it. And even after all of this other stuff happened, I continued to play my DS because the games were frankly better than what they were for other platforms. So that's the 3DS, and it was great. It could play your Game Boy Advance games. It could play DS games, and of course, if you got a 3DS, you could play the DS games as well, but not your Game Boy Advance games. Had great sound, great controls, as you can see. Really pretty good system all around. Now, what killed this though? This didn't die. This was the last dominant one. But what really killed handheld gaming? Well, it was the phone, as I said, but I think it starts a little bit before that. It starts with this little piece of hardware here. This is a second generation, I think, Apple iPod. Now the battery in it's dead, so I can't really start it up for you and show you what's up. If I have it plugged in, you can kind of see how it looks. It's a very elegant system designed exclusively towards playing MP3s, but it had games on it. And if you remember, like your Nokia phones from the 90s, if you were around for that, those had a game called Snake. People be playing Snake all the time. If you had a TI, Texas Instruments calculator, you're probably playing a game like Fall Down. There were all kinds of little games that people put on their calculators. We put games on these other devices basically to waste time. When we had time to kill, we could play solitaire on a device like this. And I played a lot of solitaire on my iPod because I'd always have it in my pocket, and I could pull it out at like the movie theater and play a game of solitaire while waiting for a movie to happen, or just play some more solitaire like between classes if I didn't have this available. This was really, once I got this was like the best thing that I'd had. The Game Boy Advance, it was a little bit bigger than this, didn't quite fit in the pocket, it was kind of awkward to carry, but this was something I could just put in my pocket and keep there. But this laid the groundwork because this turned into this right here, an iPhone. This is an iPhone 3G, so this is the second generation of iPhones here. And if you look at this, you can easily see how this turned into that. They're about the same size. They're roughly the same thickness. Of course, this one has kind of that round plastic back. I still think it's a great looking little device. I pulled it out the other day, and my wife, and I handed this to my wife, and she laughed. I wish I would have videotaped it because it was really funny. She's like, "It's so tiny. I can't believe how small it was." And it's like, this is what we wasted our time on, was this tiny little itsy bitsy device. It's like, yeah, that's what we did. And this came out during a time when everything was trying to shrink down. We were trying to make everything smaller. If you guys remember, like the Game Boy Advance SP, it was probably half the size of this. I don't have one here to show you. But everything was getting smaller and smaller, and of course the iPhone is really no exception. But they just turned this, or maybe this version, which is a click wheel version here, they really just turned that into this. And the click wheel one, you can see just how simple the games were. There weren't a lot to them, but it was something that you could do while you were wasting time. So what caused this to really do away with this? Why was the 3DS kind of not a hit? Why was the PS Vita over here not really such a hit? There's a lot of things. So the first one is that once people had phones in their pockets, and this is the most important thing to think about with business when it comes to selling software, is installed user base. Once this really took off, if you're developing software and you look at it, you're like, well, everybody's getting one of these phones. That's where we want to be. We want to be making software for a phone, because if we make software for a phone, lots of people have it. We have more customers to sell our stuff to. We have a whole lot more customers to sell our stuff to versus any of these other systems. At the same time, when this was coming out, everything wanted to be small. People didn't want a big honking flip phone in their pockets. The trend had been towards small. So this is a 3DS XL. The original 3DS is probably about the same size as this. So this looked too big. Now I can carry this in my pocket because I'm a big guy, but most people would say that's too big. You know, that can't carry that in my pocket. The PS Vita is too big. I can't carry that. I can't carry that honking thing in my pocket. This is something we can carry in our pocket. Well, kind of funny how trends work, because here's a modern phone, and wouldn't you know it, it's about the same size as the PlayStation Vita. It's bigger than the DS Lite as far as, you know, length goes. Obviously, we're talking a difference in thickness, but if you put a case on this, it's basically not that much thinner than a DS Lite, right? And in fact, it's even approaching that 3DS XL, the large size handheld gaming console. It's pretty much as big as one of those. That's how big these modern new phones are. So once we got this, then they started trying to size things up to be, you know, bigger and bigger and bigger until you have like a Galaxy Note, whatever, that's like a little something between a tablet and a phone. But the installed user base was the big thing that I think did it. So once you had the installed user base, and if you're looking at, you know, what are we going to do? We're going to sell software to people who are maybe, you know, a couple million people that maybe buy one of these, or are we going to sell it to like the 100 million people who buy one of these phone devices? The answer is we're going to buy those phone devices. What's the problem with mobile gaming, though? I've gone over it in a bunch of videos, is that where's the buttons? Where's the buttons on this, right? You can't play games of the same sort that you would play on a PlayStation Vita with analog sticks and shoulder buttons and buttons everywhere. On a phone, you just can't do it. It doesn't work. It doesn't feel right. All of the conversions I've seen of trying to convert two sticks or mouse and keyboard or something to a phone have been complete failures, at least the mainstream ones, because you have to start putting your fingers on the device in order to actually operate. Again, we have like we have a solitaire game, but we also had some creative software companies really using the capabilities of the system to do something here. Let's play 5 levels. that might not work. So this is like so disconnected. I turned it on after like 8 years, but here you go. You can roll a ball around. That's this game. It's just kind of tilting the phone. People thought this was the future of gaming because, wow, you can do so many different kinds of games. This kind of gimmick wears out really, really quickly, I think, compared to traditional games where you use a button and you have actual feedback to what you're pressing. So you can't do the same kind of games for mobile that you can for a console. And I remember even a game that was like Call of Duty Zombies or something that I could play on this phone right here. And the way you played it is you turned it sideways and you touched here in order to get it to work. Like I think here's Final Fantasy. And the way that you had to operate is you always had your thumbs on the screen. So this is bad on 2 levels. First of all, you don't have a button which is helping you to actually navigate. I guess it's not going to work on this phone. There we go. It's too outdated or something. You are covering up the screen with your fingers so you can't see the screen, and you also are not getting that feedback. So it's generally an inferior experience to what we actually play on this. This means for a mobile game design, you can't really do things like platformers. You can't do things like shooters very well. All of those kinds of games just don't really work on mobile. So companies started to go in different directions. What kind of games could you play by touching the screen? This is why everybody was playing Candy Crush. It's a combination of those two big things. A huge installed user base in the form of, Apple iOS users as well as Android users, and then an ability to make a game that required you to touch the screen or allowed you to touch the screen and didn't harm the gameplay in any way. So games like Candy Crush or Peggle, I think, is on this one. Peggle was kind of a fun one. games where you have to match things, Bejeweled, those sorts of games. All of those games make sense on a device like this, and they were very popular with casual gamers. So if you're a software company, you're looking, well, like, that's the future, that's where we're going to make the money. But for everybody else who's into traditional games, it really just meant the death of handheld gaming for quite a while. Again, these consoles came out, you had the 3DS, this is a 3DS XL, and you had the PS Vita. I think the PS Vita is a very, very underrated system. It's actually a great system to play. And like I said, when it came out, people were like, it's too big, it can't be a phone. Sony didn't make it a phone. They made it specifically for gaming, even though the original version had 3G access on it, so you could play cellular over a cellular network. You could actually play your PlayStation games, but they didn't go the full Monty and put in a SIM card and make it a phone. If this had been a PlayStation phone, it would have been great. You could hold it up here. Hello. It's about the same size as my Android phone. So why not just have this in your pocket? There's a couple things that make it hard, like the sticks are not the best for putting in your pocket. This kind of just slides in and out easier. But no one's really been willing to put buttons back on the phone in order to actually play games, and so we're kind of limited to trying to acquire software for our handhelds. We're putting this in our pocket and this in our pocket, and having just like a huge pocket. It'd be nice if they were to go back and do something like this. Now, enter something that actually changed things, I think, for the better in a couple ways, and that's this freaking behemoth compared to these. This is like the size of an Atari Lynx at this point, which was huge. The Nintendo Switch. Nintendo Switch was and is a great system for what it is. It just had so much versatility. I think it's one of the coolest game consoles that's ever been designed. There are flaws, my controllers tend to just kind of snap off now really easy. Obviously, it's underpowered compared to a PlayStation 4, but compared to, a handheld gaming system, this is great. If you consider it an actual handheld that you have the option of hooking up to your TV, it's actually a fantastic system. But what's the problem with this? It's the same problem that people thought they had with the PS Vita or the DSi way back in the day, which is you can't put that in your pocket compared to my phone. This goes in your pocket. This is too big. Well, this definitely doesn't go in your pocket unless you're wearing like some of those 90s Janko jeans, or you've got like a huge trench coat and you just kind of like stuff it in your pocket. This definitely doesn't fit in your pocket. It might fit in your purse if you're a woman, but even then, I don't know. It's really big. So it's really big for what you're doing. It's fine for a backpack. So for students that just throw it in their backpack, that's like what we did with the original Game Boy back in the 90s. You had the Game Boy in the backpack, maybe play it a little bit. So it's great for that, but for actual replacing the phone and the use of the phone, not so much as far as gaming goes. But there's one thing that's also entered the fray. Again, it's not perfect, and that's Gamepad support, at least on mobile phones now. I got this little attachment for an Xbox, Xbox One controller, and you can just pop your phone into it, and bam, you have some fun. And you can even do it at different angles, and now you can play games that use actual stick controls. And that's one of the things I've been trying to find, and I want to talk a little bit more on the channel, is some games you can actually play if you're willing to hook a gamepad up and they still use the touch controls in an acceptable way. So you can hook the gamepad up and actually play a game with those tactile controls, really feeling like you have control over what you're doing. Even playing a game that's like an RPG, it's really nice to have buttons. Buttons just make the experience so much better. So in some ways, this is kind of a return. And if you're comparing it to the Nintendo Switch, right, like you got to put this in your bag anyway. You got to put this in your laptop bag or your backpack or whatever you're doing. Well, you can put this in your backpack and play Android games here. You can play Knights of the Old Republic on your phone with a controller. You could play Fortnite, I think, probably with a controller. I haven't tested that out yet, but you can let me know if you're into that. I haven't really ever played Fortnite or had any interest in it, but I might check it out just to evaluate what's possible to do on mobile. So in some ways, handheld gaming is actually returning through the phone, but it had to go through some steps. We had to get away from the idea of where we added a phone to an iPod, and finally we've sized it up to the point where now we have a really good usable screen. This screen is actually a little bit bigger than or it's about the same size as the PS Vita screen. And if you were to get a newer, say Samsung Galaxy, the screen is actually bigger than a PS Vita. So that's pretty cool. This is an original Pixel XL, which was a great phone for what it is until the speakers died and I couldn't make phone calls on it anymore and I had to get a new phone. It just didn't have an option. at that point. And this was a great phone too for the 4 years or whatever I used it until I updated the OS and then it stopped working. So here's some big drawbacks, I think, to looking at mobile games as a replacement for a handheld gaming console. When you develop a handheld gaming console, you have one set of hardware that runs the entire duration of the life of the console. And this has been the selling point of all consoles if you're comparing it to, say, a PC. And this, what's great about software development and what's great for consumers. You're buying a standard. When you buy a PlayStation, you're buying a system that is going to have software released for it for several years, and you know all the software is going to work on that platform. So every piece of software that was released for the DS works on the DS. Every piece that was released on the 3DS works on the 3DS, sort of. We've started to get this thing where we've had console revisions. This is a new 3DS XL, which basically means it has this little nub, and there's certain games that only work on this version of the console, and that's a little bit weird to me, but you know, that's how it is. Likewise, we have the PS4 Pro, and at least Sony made sure that all the games would work on your original PlayStation, but the PS4 Pro had a couple of, you know, better graphical options. I think it was the same thing with the Xbox One X. There was no exclusive titles. They did some exclusive titles for this. But that's what's great about a console. With a device like this device tends to not last very long. This phone is a little bit over 3 years old at this point, and it wasn't a bad phone. It was a good phone for a while, and the software still runs well on it, but the hardware started to break down. But you have this thing where you update the OS, and maybe somebody comes out with a game for Android, and then it doesn't really work on the newer versions of Android. It has problems, or it just won't launch or something like that. So you run into a problem where because of the way that obsolescence works with, you know, system software, you end up breaking older software unless the company's actually actively updating it. And that really pushes game design in one very important direction that I've talked about already on the channel, and that is towards constant play. Rather than buying a game like, you know, what's in here, you know, Zelda. Rather than buying this game and getting the game and having it forever, what you do is you download a free game, and then you have to habitually play it in order to keep up with the actual gameplay. So that also means you kind of have to keep your phone up because the software will get improved and upgraded and has to work with the newest Android. You can't really operate it the same way that you would operate a console. So that's some of the problems that I've seen with this. So this little device, this little thing that's so tiny and we can't even, it's like, how could you even read anything on that tiny device? This killed handheld gaming, and it killed handheld gaming not because it was good for gaming. It was actually really bad for gaming. Barely runs software. The software breaks, as you see. Software that was originally designed for it, like Final Fantasy, will just stop working somewhere along the way. But because of the installed user base, lots of people had it. Therefore, you're going to want to develop games for it. Bright side at the end of the tunnel is lots of people are on an Android platform, and what that means is that you could develop real games for Android, and simply because of the huge size of the installed user base, you might be able to make some inroads and have some actual good software that doesn't involve gotcha mechanics and all that kind of stuff. So thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and leave me your thoughts down below about handheld gaming and the possible return of it. What I would love somebody to do, and if you know of one, just let me know, but I haven't really seen one that actually works, is basically a phone case that is the controller that you could just put your phone into. And there's a problem with that, is that every phone is like a different dimension, so it would be very difficult you'd have to design a different piece of electronics for every single phone. But if you had something that actually put the buttons on the phone, like a PlayStation Vita, boy, that would actually make mobile gaming back into handheld gaming, make it an actual gaming experience and a fun gaming experience. But I'm not aware of anything like that right now. You let me know what you think down below, and I will see you guys next time.